They mocked me, said I was overreacting, that the snow was harmless, that warning signs were ugly, that my caution made the neighborhood look bad. But I had seen what snow could do. I had buried a brother once, and I wasn't about to bury anyone else. So I put up the signs. I documented everything. I stood my ground while they rolled their eyes. And then, she parked her luxury car right beneath my roof. On the day the sun finally broke through, the snow fell, the roof roared, and the silence was shattered by her scream. That was the moment everything changed. Because when truth comes down like an avalanche, no amount of denial can stop it. The first real snow of the season arrived earlier than anyone expected mid-November, well before Thanksgiving. I remember standing at the wide front window of our new home. The glass fogged slightly from the warmth inside, watching thick flakes tumble from an iron-gray sky. Lena stood beside me, cradling a mug of chamomile tea that sent curls of steam past her cheek. On the couch behind us, Owen lay sprawled with a library book open across his chest, his small boots still dripping melted snow onto the rug. Outside, the world was turning white soft at first, then insistent, as if winter had decided to announce itself with force. We had moved to Pine Brook Ridge only that summer, trading the clamor and concrete of the city for the hush of a mountain suburb, where the air smelled of pine resin and chimney smoke. I thought we had found refuge here, quiet streets, friendly waves from porches, a place where a boy could grow up hearing owls instead of sirens. But beauty in the mountains often carries a hidden weight, and the kind of beauty that piles snow high on steep rooflines can be treacherous. I'm not just another homeowner. For 30 years, I've worked as a structural designer, most of that time focused on buildings meant to withstand extreme weather blizzards, high winds, ice loads that could crush lesser structures. I've stood on frozen job sites and watched roofs sag under invisible pressure. I've calculated the sheer strength of snow until the numbers haunted my dreams. And I've lived the worst of it. I know exactly how quickly a silent white blanket can turn lethal. That's why, when we chose this house, I made certain changes before we even unpacked the last box. I installed angled snow guards above the front and back entrances, reinforced the overhangs, and fine-tuned the internal drainage so water wouldn't pool and freeze. It wasn't paranoia. It was memory. Years ago, when I was still green, I lost my little brother Caleb to a roof collapse. He was 8, chasing a sled that had slid beneath the eaves of an old barn we were converting. The snow came down in one sudden sheet, and by the time we dug through, it was too late. I still hear the silence that followed, the kind of silence that swallows everything. So when the first heavy storm hit, and the snow began to cling to our steep roof, I didn't hesitate. The morning after, while other families were snapping photos of snowmen and posting them to the neighborhood Facebook page, I carried 2 bright orange caution markers out to the driveway. I hammered them deep into the frozen bank beside the walk. Caution roof avalanche zone, do not park or stand within 12 feet of eaves. They weren't elegant. They looked like something borrowed from a ski resort hazard line, bold black letters on fluorescent backing. But they were honest, necessary. Snow doesn't stay put forever on a pitched roof, and when it decides to move, it moves fast and hard. I wanted no one-child, delivery driver, neighbor caught beneath it. Lena steadied the posts while I drove them in. The wind nipped at our faces, carrying the sharp scent of fresh powder. "You think the HOA will approve of these?" she asked, her voice low, almost lost in the hush of falling snow. I wiped frost from my gloves. They don't have to approve. They just have to see them. Owen burst through the door, then cheeks flushed, mittens dangling from his sleeves by yarn cords. "Dad, can I help clear the path to the mailbox?" I grinned, despite the cold. "Absolutely. Just stay clear of the gutters, okay, bud?" He nodded solemnly, already scooping armfuls of snow and hurling them toward the trees. For a brief moment, everything felt right, the 3 of us together, the new house glowing warmly behind us, the world wrapped in quiet white. That was the last peaceful moment of the day. Around 2 o'clock, I spotted her walking down our side of the street, Karen Whitmore. Platinum blonde bob perfectly styled beneath a red wool coat, fur-lined boots that looked too pristine for the slush. She moved with the deliberate grace of someone accustomed to being noticed, her small dog prancing on a taut leash, as if even the snow ought to part for them. She slowed when she reached our yard, her gaze fixed on the orange markers and her lips pursed in unmistakable disapproval. "What on earth are these?" she called across the snow, her voice bright and sharp enough to cut glass. I walked over, boots crunching. Safety alerts. The roof pitch here is steep. With this much accumulation, there's real risk of a slide off the eaves. Just trying to keep everyone out of harm's way. She tilted her head, a small, amused laugh escaping her. A slide, Jack, isn't it the new family? We're not at a ski resort, dear. Next, you'll be installing Avalanche beacons. A couple of neighbors had paused their walks pretending to adjust scarves while they listened. It's only a precaution, I said evenly. Karen surveyed me the way one might appraise an oddly placed lawn ornament. This neighborhood has standards, Jack. Aesthetic standards. Those things are rather garish, don't you think? I'd rather be garish than sorry. She laughed again, louder this time, as if I'd told a mildly entertaining joke. Well, you must be a riot at parties. I didn't reply. There was no point. The chill in her smile said everything. That night, after Owen was asleep and the house had settled into its winter creaks, Lena reached across the dinner table and covered my hand with hers. I know why you did it, she said softly, and I'm proud of you. But don't let her get under your skin. I stared into the flickering candle between us. If someone gets hurt because I stayed quiet, I can't go through that again. Owen's voice drifted in from the hallway. He'd been listening at the door. Did something bad happen before Dad? Lena and I exchanged a glance. I nodded slowly. Yeah, buddy. A long time ago. My little brother Caleb, he didn't make it out from under snow like this. Owen padded over and wrapped his arms around my waist without a word. The weight of his small body against me anchored the memory, kept it from swallowing me whole. Later, lying in bed, I listened to the wind pushing fresh powder against the windows. I thought of Karen's laugh, echoing in the cold. I thought of the neighbors, watching, uncertain whose side to take. And I thought of Caleb, his gap-toothed grin, the way he used to chase snowflakes with his tongue out. I left the caution markers exactly where they were, and I waited for whatever came next. 3 days after I drove those bright orange posts into the snowbank, the first official pushback arrived not with a knock, but with a soft rustle at the front door. I found a cream-colored envelope lying on the mat, my name written in flowing, confident cursive. No stamp. No footsteps leading away in the fresh powder. Whoever delivered it had wanted to remain unseen. Inside was a single sheet, crisp and formal. Notice of violation, HOA Aesthetic Code 3.2b. Non-standard signage placed on residential property must be removed within 48 hours, unless prior approval has been granted by the board. Failure to comply may result in daily fines of $500. At the bottom, signed in the same elegant hand, Karen Whitmore, HOA President. I stood in the entryway holding the paper, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest like a cold stone. No mention of the reason for the markers. No curiosity about the hazard they warned against. Just aesthetics and a threat. Lena came in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. She took one look at my face and knew. She actually did it, she said quietly. She did. Lena read the notice, her brow furrowing. It's like the safety part doesn't even exist to her. She thinks if it's ugly, it can't be important. I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. That evening, after Owen was tucked in and the house was quiet except for the low hum of the furnace, I opened my laptop at the dining table. The glow of the screen lit the room in pale blue. I spent nearly 2 hours digging through the HOA bylaws, page after page of rules about fence heights, holiday light colors, and approved mailbox designs. Finally buried beneath landscaping minutiae, I found the clause Karen had quoted. Aesthetic Code 3.2b was real, and it was deliberately vague. But deeper still, under a section titled Emergency and Safety Provisions, I located Code 7.1d temporary safety notices were permitted in response to immediate environmental hazards, provided they were clearly marked and removed once the threat passed. I highlighted the passage in yellow, printed it, and gathered everything else I thought might matter. Weather reports showing cumulative snowfall, photos of the loaded roofline, close-ups of the caution markers themselves. I placed it all in a plastic sleeve, along with a short, respectful cover letter addressed to the entire board. The next morning, while Lena and Owen ate oatmeal at the table, I walked the folder down to the HOA drop box by the clubhouse. The air was sharp, my breath fogging in front of me. I slid the envelope through the slot and heard it land with a soft thud. Back home, Owen looked up from his bowl. Are the bright posts going away, Dad? Not yet, buddy. Not if they're still needed. He nodded, satisfied, and returned to drawing rocket ships on his placemat. That weekend brought the neighborhood's annual winter cheer walk, strings of white lights along the sidewalks, carolers in scarves, tables of cocoa and cookies set up near the clubhouse. Families bundled up and strolled the loop, the air filled with laughter and the scent of pine and chocolate. I was outside clearing the front walk when I noticed Karen holding court near our yard. She stood in the circle of glowing string lights, red coat vivid against the snow, gesturing animatedly with a thermos in hand. A small cluster of neighbors had gathered around her. Her voice carried just far enough. "It's a shame when new residents don't quite grasp the visual harmony we've worked so hard to maintain," she said, her tone light and breezy, as if sharing a harmless observation. Some people seem to think a little snow gives them license to turn the street into a construction zone. A few polite chuckles. A couple of sideways glances toward our house. I kept shoveling the scrape of metal on concrete, steady and deliberate. Karen spotted me and waved brightly. "Oh, Jack, perfect timing. I hope you received my note about those eyesores. We'd all love to see the neighborhood looking festive again." I leaned on the shovel. I responded to the board with the relevant safety clause. The markers stay until the risk passes. Her smile didn't waver, but something sharpened behind it. "Oh, honey, we've had snow here for years. Nothing ever slides. The only thing falling around here is people's patience with unnecessary drama." Owen peeked out the front door, then bundled in his puffy jacket, watching with wide eyes. Lena appeared behind him, arms crossed, her expression calm but unyielding. I met Karen's gaze. Better safe than sorry. She gave a theatrical sigh and turned back to her audience, already humming "Let It Snow" as the group drifted away. Owen trotted over, snow crunching under his boots. Why doesn't she like the posts they're helping? I ruffled his hair. Some people care more about how things look than what could happen. He considered that, then shrugged. But we're keeping them right. For now, yes. That night, after the carolers had gone and the lights along the street blinked off one by one, I sat at the kitchen table again. Lena poured us both a mug of tea and sat across from me. "You okay?" she asked. I stared into the steam. I keep thinking about Caleb. If someone had put up even a simple rope that day, maybe things would be different. She reached for my hand. "You're doing what you can. That's all anyone can ask." The next day, I emailed Karen directly, polite, factual, with the highlighted HOA clause attached and the rest of the board copied. I also included the city's building safety liaison just to be thorough. Her reply arrived within minutes. 4 words, cold and final. "Noted. Remove them anyway." I printed the email and added it to the growing folder, because something told me this wasn't over, and I intended to be ready when the next move came. The tension lingered like frost on the windows, quiet but impossible to ignore. I tried to focus on the ordinary rhythm of our days, driving Owen to school, helping Lena prep meals for her volunteer shifts at the clinic, clearing the driveway after each fresh dusting. But every time I stepped outside, my eyes drifted to the caution markers still standing proud in their snowbanks, their orange osses bright against the white. Then came the moment I'd half expected. That Wednesday morning, after another overnight snowfall left 6 fresh inches on the ground, I stepped out early to check the roofline. The drift along the eaves had grown noticeably thicker overnight, the edge curling slightly like a breaking wave frozen mid-motion. I added 4 reflective safety cones along the driveway's danger zone, spacing them carefully so no one could miss the boundary. I was scattering salt on the porch steps when I heard the low, expensive purr of an engine. A silver Lexus SUV rounded the bend and slowed deliberately in front of our house. My stomach tightened as it turned into our driveway, slow, almost theatrical, and came to rest directly beneath the overhang I'd been warning about for days. Karen stepped out. Red cashmere scarf knotted perfectly at her throat, boots polished to a gleam. She closed the door with a solid thunk and tilted her head back to look up at the roof. For a long second, she studied the heavy white shelf above her windshield. Then her lips curved into a small, knowing smirk. She didn't speak to me. She didn't need to. The message was clear. "I see your little signs. I'm not impressed." Without a word, she walked off down the street, her dog trotting behind her, leaving the Lexus parked squarely in the Avalanche path. Lena appeared at the door a moment later, coat half zipped. "Did she just—" "Dead center," I said quietly. "Why would she do that?" "To make a point, to prove she's in charge." Lena's eyes narrowed. "She's daring the snow to fall." I pulled out my phone and walked to the edge of the driveway. I took 5 clear photos, the Lexus framed against the orange markers, the The cones, the bulging snowpack overhead, the security camera mounted under the porch eaves with its steady red light blinking. Then I went around to the side of the house, double-checked that the camera's view of the entire driveway was unobstructed, and went inside. I transferred the footage to my laptop, labeled the file with date and time, and made a backup to the cloud. That evening, I composed a calm, factual email to the entire HOA board. I attached the stills from the video, reminded them of my earlier correspondence, and copied the local code enforcement officer and the district fire marshal for good measure. I closed with one simple sentence. Should any incident occur, I want it clearly on record that the hazard was identified, publicly marked, and that Ms. Whitmore chose to park directly beneath it, despite repeated warnings. Lena read over my shoulder before I hit send. She'll spin this as you harassing her. I know. That's why everything is timestamped. Owen wandered in backpack still on. Why is Ms. Whitmore's fancy car in our driveway? She parked it there today, I said carefully. Just visiting the neighborhood. He frowned, looking out the window at the gleaming silver hood. But that's exactly where the snow falls, right? That's why the markers are there, bud. He thought for a moment. Does she not believe you? I managed a small, sad smile. Some people only believe something after they see it happen. That night, I lay awake listening to the house settle. The wind had died down, leaving an eerie stillness. I kept picturing the Lexus sitting there, under hundreds of pounds of compacted snow, waiting for the first warm hour to loosen its grip. The next morning, the car was still there. A thin layer of fresh powder had settled overnight, dusting the roof like powdered sugar on a cake. It looked almost peaceful if you didn't know what was above it. I made coffee, watched the sky lighten, and waited. Around noon, Marcus, the young dad from 2 houses down, stopped by while walking his toddlers in their little red sled. He glanced at the Lexus, then at me. You okay with that? He asked, nodding toward the car. Not really, but it's her choice. He shifted uncomfortably. She's been telling people you're trying to scare everyone, that the markers make the street look like a disaster zone. I'm not trying to scare anyone, I said. I'm trying to keep them alive. He looked up at the roof, following my pointing finger to the slight bulge near the edge. Is it really that dangerous? That layer you see, it's already slipped a couple inches on its own. One sunny afternoon and the whole slab comes down in seconds. It's not fluffy anymore. It's dense, almost ice. You wouldn't want to be underneath. Marcus's face paled. Jesus. She knows, I added quietly. She just doesn't care. He looked at the car again, then back at me. I believe you, Jack. For what it's worth. I nodded. Thanks. That evening, the sky cleared completely. Stars glittered sharp and cold overhead. Karen's Lexus sat motionless under its blanket of white, unmoving, defiant. Lena came up behind me at the window. She's playing chicken with physics. No, I corrected softly. She's playing chicken with consequences. I'd seen pride like hers before. The kind that dismisses warnings because admitting danger means admitting vulnerability. The kind that costs lives. I'd paid that price once already. I wouldn't let my family or anyone else pay it again. The next morning, I took one more set of photos, one more short video clip, and added them to the archive labeled Ongoing Hazard, Day 4. Then I went inside, poured another cup of coffee, and kept watch. 5 days. That was how long the silver Lexus remained parked beneath the eaves. 5 days too many. By Friday morning, the silver Lexus had become a fixture in our driveway. 5 full days. Parked defiantly beneath the eaves, its sleek lines softened under layers of fresh powder. The snowpack on the roof had transformed into something denser, more ominous, a thick compressed slab that gleamed with a subtle crust of ice whenever the weak winter sun broke through. The temperature had flirted with freezing for days, just enough to melt the surface slightly before refreezing it harder, priming the entire mass for a sudden release. I'd done everything short of physically moving the car myself. The archive on my laptop now held a meticulous record, daily photos, time-stamped video clips from the security camera, weather logs showing accumulation and temperature swings. But silence from the HOA board felt heavier than any response. It was as if they hoped the problem would simply melt away. That morning, after waving Owen off to the school bus and kissing Lena goodbye before her shift, I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh pot of coffee and opened a new document. I titled it plainly, Roof Avalanche Hazard, Recorded Evidence and Alerts. I compiled it all high-resolution images of the loaded roof screenshots of Karen's parking incidents across 5 days. copies of every email and HOA correspondence, even the county weather service bulletin's warning of slide risks in high elevation areas like ours. Then I drafted 3 separate messages. The first went to the full HOA board, reiterating that a clear hazard had been marked for over a week, that their president had repeatedly placed her vehicle in the direct path, and that I had preserved every piece of evidence. The second landed in the inbox of the County Office of Building Safety and Code Compliance. I explained the situation, calmly attached the full file, and noted how the HOA's demands seemed to conflict with basic safety allowances. The third reached the local fire marshal's office. I referenced the county handbook section on preventable roof slides and a homeowner's duty to alert others when feasible. Each ended the same way. This is not sent in anger or spite. It is a careful effort to prevent an entirely avoidable injury or worse. I hit send on all 3, then leaned back and rubbed my eyes. The house felt too quiet. Lena came home around noon, cheeks pink from the cold, and found me still at the table. "You look exhausted," she said, slipping off her coat. "I feel like I'm shouting into a void." She glanced out the window at the Lexus, now half buried under another light dusting. "She's waiting you out, hoping you'll cave and take everything down. The roof won't wait forever." Lena rested her hands on my shoulders. "You've covered every base, Jack. You really have." That evening, I drove to the Township Municipal Building while the sky bled into twilight. I carried a flash drive and a sealed manila envelope addressed to the building code officer. Inside was a hard copy of everything with a short note on top: "For official record, should an incident occur, please review." The young clerk at the desk took it hesitantly. "Is this urgent?" I paused, the memory of Caleb's small, cold hand flashing through my mind. A long time ago, a child died because no one spoke up in time. I still remember his shoes sticking out of the snow. She didn't reply, just nodded and stamped the envelope. Back home, we tried to keep the evening normal. Owen sprawled on the living room rug, coloring planets in bold crayon strokes, Lena curled in her armchair with a blanket and a novel, me pretending to read, while my gaze kept drifting to the dark window and the silent silver shape outside. Lena broke the quiet. "Have you thought about moving the cones closer just to block it off completely?" "I have. But if I do and something still happens, they'll say I interfered. Or worse, that I set a trap." She sighed. "You think they'll twist it no matter what?" "I know they will." The next morning brought the first real response, not from Karen, not from the HOA, but from County Building Inspector Mitchell Raines. "Mr. Delaney, thank you for the detailed submission. We have reviewed the images and your references to county ordinances. Your safety notices appear fully compliant with Ordinance 46A, temporary hazard marking during environmental threats. You are within your rights to maintain them. This file will be forwarded to HOA Oversight for review. Please keep all records secure. Respectfully, Mitchell Raines." I read it twice, then forwarded it immediately to the HOA board. No one replied. Later that day, a snowplow driver who regularly cleared our loop pulled up while I was salting the steps. He killed the engine and leaned out, his window eyes fixed on the roof. "You the one who's been warning about that load?" "I am." He whistled low. "A slab like that breaks loose all at once, it'll hit like a damn truck." "I've told her." He glanced at the Lexus. "Some folks gotta learn the hard way." He drove off without another word. By Sunday, the sky had cleared again, sunlight slicing across the roof at a low angle that made the ice crust sparkle. I could see tiny rivulets of meltwater tracing down the shingles, subtle but unmistakable. It was close now. I took one final set of photos, recorded another short video, and uploaded everything to a cloud folder labeled "Final Evidence Before Potential Slide, Dated." Then I printed backups. Over dinner, Owen asked the question that had been hovering in the air. "If the snow falls on our car, will people say it's your fault?" Lena and I shared a look. "They might try," I said gently. "But everything we've done is written down, recorded, official." Owen chewed thoughtfully. "Then the snow will know the truth too, right?" I smiled, though it felt heavy. "Snow doesn't care about truth, buddy. It just falls when the time comes." And from the way the sunlight warmed the eaves that afternoon, the time was drawing very near. We were as prepared as we could be. The neighborhood, however, was not. Monday dawned with a sky so clear it hurt to look at pale blue glass stretched over the ridge, the sun already climbing and pouring golden light across the rooftops. The temperature had nudged just above freezing, and the air carried that deceptive softness of early thaw edges of snowbanks, dripping icicles weeping steady tears onto the ground below. It was the kind of morning that lured people outside to scrape windshields and snap pictures of glittering lawns, blind to the danger building overhead. I knew better. The snow on our roof had become a single treacherous sheet, dense, slick, and heavy with days of compaction. Beneath the bright crust lay softer layers warmed by the sun, loosening their grip on the shingles. One good shift, one critical melt, and the whole mass would let go. I'd exhausted every official channel. The evidence was archived, backed up, forwarded to inspectors and marshals. Now it was about protecting my family and anyone else who might wander too wily close. While the neighborhood stirred with coffee mugs and dog leashes, I worked quickly. I strung bright yellow caution tape along both sides of the driveway and the sidewalk beneath the eaves, creating a clear, no-entry zone. I added reflective strips to the orange posts so they'd flash like beacons, even in low light. Then I climbed the ladder, carefully testing each rung, and inspected the snow guards and deflectors I'd installed months earlier. I tightened a loose bracket, cleared minor ice from the channels, and came down with frost stinging my fingertips. Lena joined me on the porch, arms hugged tight against the chill. She watched me angle the security camera one last time, ensuring the red recording light caught the full sweep of the driveway and the silver Lexus still parked there like a deliberate challenge. "Is this bordering on too much?" she asked softly, her breath fogging between us. "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "When it falls, and it will, no one will be able to say I didn't try everything." She followed my gaze down the street. A small knot of neighbors had gathered near the cul-de-sac, steaming mugs in hand. Karen stood at the center, laughing at something, her posture relaxed and triumphant, as if the sun itself had taken her side. "They're still talking about the tape and cones," Lena murmured. "Let them talk." Owen burst out the front door, then scarf-trailing cheeks already pink. He skidded to a stop at the yellow tape, respecting the boundary without being told. He knew the rules by heart now. Lena watched him with a faint smile. "At least one person believes you completely." "That's all I need," I said, but the knot in my chest tightened anyway. Because it wasn't just about belief, it was about what happened when belief came too late. That afternoon, I walked the block, slowly, boots crunching on the softening snow. And I noticed something that stopped me cold. 3 houses down, a simple hand-lettered sign had appeared, white poster board on a wooden stake. "Watch for roof slides." Farther along, another traffic cones, and a strip of caution tape mirroring mine. And at Marcus's place, a bright new board painted in bold red. "Danger. Possible avalanche zone." I stood there, breath caught in my throat. It wasn't widespread, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall of dismissal. Quiet, private acknowledgments that maybe the warnings weren't hysteria after all. Marcus spotted me from his garage and jogged over, dragging 2 snow shovels. "Hey man, hope you don't mind I borrowed your style." "Not at all," I said, a real smile breaking through for the first time in days. "Glad someone's paying attention." He shrugged a little sheepish. "Karen's calling it mass hysteria. Says you've got everyone paranoid. Better paranoid than flattened." He laughed, then glanced up at my roof. "Seriously though, if that thing lets go, it will, and soon." We stood in silence for a moment, the sun warm on our faces, the snow groaning faintly overhead. That evening at dinner, Lena mentioned the new markers she'd seen while picking Owen up from school. "It's starting to spread," she said, passing the potatoes. "Some people have to see others take it seriously before they'll risk looking foolish themselves," I replied. Owen looked up from his plate. "What if the snow melts instead of falling? Then everyone will say you worried for nothing." I leaned toward him. "Then I'll be the happiest man alive because no one got hurt." "Preparing isn't about being right, buddy. It's about being ready." He nodded slowly, then added, "But if it does fall on her car, that won't be your fault, right?" "No," I said firmly. "Fault belongs to the person who ignored every alert." Outside, the temperature began its evening drop, but the day's warmth had done its work. Tiny cracks were forming in the ice, invisible from the ground, spreading like silent lightning through the slab. Tuesday brought an even sharper rise, 8 degrees warmer, cloudless sky, direct sun hammering the southern exposure of the roof. Perfect conditions. Karen did not move the Lexus. Not that day. Not the next. The snow waited, patient, indifferent, immense. We were ready. The neighborhood was beginning to wake up, but time was running out. The forecast for Thursday arrived like a verdict, temperatures pushing into the low 40s by midday, bright sun, no clouds in sight. The kind of day that felt like a gift after weeks of gray, the kind that coaxed people out of their houses with smiles and light jackets. But for anyone who understood mountain weather, it was a countdown. I woke before dawn, the house still wrapped in that pre-sunrise hush. The air coming through the cracked bedroom window carried a new note wet earth beneath the faint drip of melting ice from the gutters. I lay there listening to the soft creaks of the roof as the night's freeze gave way to the first subtle warming. Lena stirred beside me, her hand finding mine under the covers. "Today," she whispered. "Today," I confirmed. We moved quietly through the morning routine. Coffee brewed strong and dark. Owen ate his cereal without his usual chatter, sensing the weight in the air. I checked the security camera one last time, battery full angle, perfect, red light, steady. Then I stepped outside to refresh the caution tape, where overnight wind had loosened a corner. The yellow strips fluttered like flags in surrender. At 9 o'clock sharp, a beige sedan I didn't recognize pulled up across the street and parked well clear of any eaves. Karen emerged from the driver's side, dressed in tailored wool and sunglasses that reflected the sky. She crossed the road with her usual measured stride keys jingling softly and approached her Lexus as if greeting an old friend who'd been waiting patiently. She opened the passenger door, leaned in rummaging for something, papers perhaps, or her phone. The sun poured down, turning the silver paint into a mirror. Icicles along the gutter began to weep in earnest droplets, sparkling as they fell. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee forgotten in my hand. Lena joined me, her shoulder pressing against mine. Owen hovered nearby, unusually silent. From inside the house, we felt it before we heard it, a deep, visceral tremor that traveled through the floorboards, the kind of vibration that sets birds exploding from the trees a heartbeat before disaster. Then came the sound. A sharp, explosive crack like a tree trunk, splitting in extreme cold, followed by a low, grinding groan that built into a roar. The entire slab of snow and ice detached in one colossal sheet. For a fraction of a second, it seemed to hang in the air, a white wall suspended above the driveway. Then gravity seized it. It dropped, plotted downward with terrifying speed and force. The impact was deafening, a wet, thunderous whoomp that rattled windows up and down the block. Hundreds of pounds of compacted snow and ice slammed onto the Lexus in a single crushing blow. The windshield imploded in a spray of glass shards. The roof caved inward with a metallic shriek, folding like cardboard. Doors buckled. A violent wave of snow erupted outward, splashing across the driveway and into the street in a churning white surge. Karen had just straightened up from the passenger side. She never saw it coming. Her scream tore through the morning, raw, animal-piercing. It wasn't a yelp of surprise. It was the sound of someone watching their world collapse in real time. My mug slipped from my fingers and shattered on the tile. Lena gasped. Owen's eyes went wide as saucers. I was out the door before I registered moving boots skidding on the porch steps. Neighbors poured from houses in robes and slippers, phones already raised. Someone shouted. Another swore under their breath. Karen stood frozen in the street, one gloved hand clamped over her mouth, the other pointing at the wreckage, as if she could will it back into shape. The Lexus was unrecognizable, roof crushed to seat-level windows, blown-out hood, buried under a mound of snow and jagged ice chunks. Steam hissed from beneath the debris where the engine had taken the full brunt. She spun toward me as I approached, face-flushed, crimson eyes, wild with shock and fury. You did this," she shrieked, voice cracking. "No, Karen," I said, steady, despite the adrenaline surging through me. "Gravity did. You knew, you let it happen. I warned you. Repeatedly. In writing, on camera. You parked there anyway." She trembled, fists clenched so tight her knuckles went white. "This is criminal. I'm calling the police. You'll pay for every cent." "They're already on the way," I replied calmly. "I called them the moment it started to go." Her expression flickered rage, giving way to confusion. Then something colder. Realization. Lena and Owen were behind me now. Owen stared at the ruined car like it was a mythical beast finally slain. Lena slipped her hand into mine. More neighbors gathered at a safe distance, murmuring, filming, shaking their heads. The air smelled of disturbed snow and hot metal. Deputy Rollins arrived within minutes, cruiser lights flashing against the bright morning. He stepped out, surveyed the scene, and let out a low whistle. "Damn," he muttered. Karen rushed toward him, words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "Arrest him! He caused this. He set a trap. Rollins raised a hand. Ma'am, take a breath. Let's everyone stay calm. He knew it would fall. He did nothing. The deputy turned to me. Jack, you got everything recorded like you said. Every frame. Signs, cones, tape, all still in place. Footage from the last 5 days, emails, official submissions. It's all there. Karen stared at him in disbelief. You're taking his side. I'm following evidence, ma'am. That's my job. The morning blurred after that statements given, photos taken, the tow truck called. Karen stood apart, arms wrapped around herself, the fight draining from her posture with every passing minute. She looked smaller somehow. The snow had spoken loud and undeniable. And for the first time in weeks, the neighborhood listened. By noon, the crumpled Lexus had transformed into the neighborhood's unwilling centerpiece. People slowed their cars as they passed, craning necks for a better view. Kids on sleds detoured from the park to gawk at the twisted metal half buried in snow. A few neighbors lingered at the edge of the yellow tape, murmuring in low voices, phones discreetly angled to capture the spectacle. No one posted the photos publicly, at least not yet, but the story was already spreading like meltwater down the gutters. Karen was anything but quiet. Less than an hour after Deputy Rollins left with my flash drive tucked safely in his pocket, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I let it ring through, then played it on speaker while Lena washed vegetables for lunch. Karen's voice filled the kitchen, tight, trembling with barely contained fury. Jack Delaney, I hope you're prepared for what comes next. I've already spoken to my attorney. You can expect a civil suit for property damage, emotional distress, and gross negligence. You engineered this. You wanted it to happen, and now it has. This is far from over. The message ended with a sharp beep. Lena didn't look up from the sink. She's lashing out. She's scared, I said. Scared and humiliated. Still no apology. Not even a hint. I spent the afternoon organizing the binder that had grown thick over the weeks. Tabbed sections now held everything: initial caution markers and photos, HOA violation notice, and my response time-stamped footage of Karen parking beneath the eaves on 5 separate occasions, every email exchange, the county inspector's endorsement, the fire marshal's eventual report. I even added Deputy Rollins' incident number. My old colleague Richard, an insurance defense attorney, who owed me for redesigning his mountain cabin, called back within minutes of my message. Jack, send me the files, he said without preamble. From what you've described, this is classic assumption of risk. You warned her repeatedly, publicly, officially. She ignored it. The car's damage is on her, not you. She's threatening criminal charges, too. Let her try. You've got law enforcement, county officials, and a paper trail thicker than that snow slab. You're bulletproof. It doesn't feel that way. That's because you're decent, he said gently. Decent people don't enjoy being right when it costs someone else. 2 envelopes arrived the next morning. The first was heavy ivory stock, Karen's signature style, containing a cease and desist letter from her attorney. Phrases like reckless endangerment and deliberate entrapment leaped off the page in bold legalese. The second came from the HOA, unsigned but official. Mr. Delaney, the board is aware of yesterday's incident involving HOA President Karen Whitmore's vehicle. An internal review is pending. In the meantime, please refrain from public commentary on HOA forums regarding this matter. HOA Board Secretary. They were closing ranks. That afternoon, I took Owen sledding on the gentle hill behind the high school, soft, harmless snow, far from any roofs or politics. I pushed him down the slope again and again, his laughter echoing bright and free. When he tumbled into a drift and came up grinning, face crusted white, something tight in my chest loosened for the first time in weeks. I'm okay, Dad, he shouted. I waved back. Good. That's the only kind of avalanche I ever want you under. Back home, Lena handed me her phone. You need to see this. Karen had posted a long, blistering update to the private HOA Facebook group. She described the malicious orchestration of her property destruction, accused me of negligent design and refusal to comply with community standards, and painted herself as the victim of a vindictive newcomer. I scrolled to the comments. There were none. Not a single heart emoji. Not one "we're here for you." Just a handful of cautious questions and one standout reply from Marcus. I saw the caution markers up for over a week. And the tape, and the cones. Pretty sure Jack warned everyone who'd listen. Karen deleted the entire post less than an hour later. That evening, Owen curled against me on the couch, fresh from his bath hair still damp. Is Ms. Whitmore really mad because her car got squished? Mad and embarrassed, I think. She said it was your fault. I looked down at him. What do you think? He didn't hesitate. You told her? You told everybody. That's what you always say, warn people even when they don't want to hear it. I hugged him close. Exactly right. So, did you win? I thought about the wrecked Lexus, about Karen's scream still ringing in my ears, about the uneasy silence settling over the neighborhood. It's not about winning, bud, I said softly. It's about doing what's right even when everyone's laughing, especially then. He nodded sleepily. You're good at that. I kissed the top of his head and stared into the fire. The next morning, the tow truck finally came. The operator winched the mangled Lexus onto the flatbed. With slow, deliberate motions, metal groaning chains clanking snow, cascading off the crumpled roof like a final surrender. He never once looked my way, just shook his head as the ruined vehicle dragged away behind him. Karen didn't appear to watch, but the neighborhood did. One by one, residents paused on their walks slower than usual. Some met my eyes and nodded small, almost imperceptible acknowledgments. No one laughed. No one smirked. As the truck disappeared around the bend, dragging its broken cargo, a quiet settled over the street. It wasn't celebration. It wasn't vindication. It was something closer to recognition. The thaw had begun not just in the snow, but in the neighborhood itself. And closure, real closure, was finally within reach. The days following the avalanche felt strangely suspended, as though the neighborhood had collectively held its breath and forgotten how to exhale. The driveway was cleared of debris. The caution tape removed the orange markers quietly taken down one morning while the street was still dark. Yet the absence of the wrecked Lexus left an empty space that everyone noticed, a scarred patch of concrete where something irreversible had happened. Karen's house remained dark for longer stretches than usual. The porch lights that once burned late into the night stayed off. No morning walks with her dog. No sharp silhouette moving behind the curtains. Just silence, where noise had once reigned. At first, I expected retaliation, more letters, more threats, perhaps even a lawsuit filed in haste. Instead, the quiet stretched, and in that quiet, small shifts began to appear. The insurance adjuster arrived 4 days later, bundled in a heavy parka clipboard, in hand boots, crunching across Karen's driveway. I happened to be outside sweeping the last of the slush from our walk when he paused in front of one of the caution markers I hadn't yet removed. He studied it for a long moment, then raised his phone and took several photos. Not accusatory. Methodical. Professional. Karen joined him shortly after, her coat immaculate, but her movements stiff, her face drawn tighter than I remembered. They spoke in low tones I couldn't hear. When he left, she stood alone in the driveway for several minutes, staring at the spot where her car had been crushed, arms wrapped around herself as if the cold had finally reached her. Then the shouting started. It came through the closed front door of her house, sharp, indignant bursts that carried across the quiet street. Words like fraud and unacceptable. And they can't do this floated out, followed by a long, frustrated silence. I stayed inside, pretending not to hear. That evening, another envelope appeared under our door, same thick ivory stock, same faint, expensive scent. I opened it slowly. Mr. Delaney, my insurance claim has been denied based on the documentation you so eagerly supplied. I hope you take satisfaction in knowing your actions setting up this elaborate display, refusing to remove hazardous obstructions, and broadcasting every detail have caused irreparable harm. If you believe this concludes matters, you are gravely mistaken. Karen Whitmore. I handed the letter to Lena without comment. She read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it beside the growing stack on the kitchen counter. Still no acknowledgement, she said quietly. Not even a whisper of regret. Pride doesn't apologize easily. The next morning brought the official word I'd been waiting for, not from Karen, but from the Pine County Fire Marshal's office. Dear Mr. Delaney, after thorough review of your submitted materials, including photographs, video surveillance, prior correspondence with the HOA weather data, and on-site inspection notes, we conclude that you acted in full compliance with county safety guidelines. Your temporary hazard markings were consistent with municipal code provisions for immediate environmental threats. No liability fault or citation will be assigned to you in connection with the incident of January 15th, 2026. We appreciate your proactive efforts to prevent potential harm. Respectfully, Fire Marshal Jason Trent, Pine County Emergency Response and Safety Division. I printed the letter, pinned it to the refrigerator door with a simple magnet shaped like a snowflake, and forwarded a copy to the HOA board email list. Still no reply. But that evening, something shifted on the HOA online portal. A new announcement appeared in the board updates section, understated and clinical. Special emergency meeting scheduled. Date Thursday, January 23rd, 2026, 6:00 p.m. Location Pinebrook Ridge, Community Hall. Agenda review of recent safety incident and board governance matters. All residents welcome to attend. I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading the words. Lena came up behind me. They're finally addressing it. Or trying to contain the damage before someone else sues the association itself. Probably both. Thursday arrived faster than expected. The community hall was fuller than I'd ever seen it, metal folding chairs, nearly all occupied, people standing along the back wall, coats draped over arms, the air thick with the scent of wet wool and coffee from the urn in the corner. Karen sat near the front row, spine, rigid hands folded in her lap. The usual aura of command still clung to her, but it had thinned noticeably. Her eyes flicked toward the door every time someone entered, as though hoping for reinforcements that never arrived. HOA Secretary Brian Langley took the podium, clearing his throat twice before speaking. We're gathered tonight to discuss the recent roof slide incident and related concerns about safety policies, signage protocols, and board conduct. He avoided naming Karen directly. He didn't need to. One resident after another stood to speak. Marcus went first, voice steady. I saw the markers, the cones, the tape. Ms. Whitmore parked under that overhang anyway. If Jack hadn't kept warning us, someone could have been seriously hurt or worse. A low murmur of agreement rippled through the room. An older woman near the back added, I watched the security footage. That snow came down like a wall. You can't blame a man for what nature does when he tried to stop it. Karen's jaw tightened, lips pressing into a thin white line. A retired fire captain named Roy, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, stood slowly. I've seen staged accidents. This wasn't one. This was negligence. But not on the homeowner's part. Karen finally rose, slamming her folder onto the table with enough force to make several people flinch. I am being unfairly targeted for upholding community standards, she snapped, voice rising. This entire episode has turned into fearmongering and character assassination. I worked for years to keep this place orderly, beautiful, safe in its own way. A voice from the back muttered, safe until it wasn't. Karen's eyes swept the room, searching for allies and finding few. I will not be made the villain over a weather event. The room fell quiet. Then I stood. I didn't rush. I let the silence settle completely before I spoke. I never set out to prove anyone wrong, I said, voice low, but carrying. I only wanted to be heard before someone got hurt. When that didn't happen, I recorded everything. Because I've seen what happens when warnings are ignored. Because my son plays in that driveway. Because no title or position should ever override basic safety. I looked directly at Karen for the first time since the incident. You turned it personal, but it was never about you. It was about preventing harm. It still is. The silence that followed felt different, weighty, final. Brian Langley cleared his throat again. The board will now adjourn to executive session to discuss leadership transitions and policy revisions. Karen remained seated for a long moment. Then, without a word, she gathered her things and walked out. No one followed her. No one spoke. The door closed behind her with a soft click that echoed louder than any shout. And just like that, the room exhaled. Karen vanished from view in the days that followed the meeting. Her house stood shuttered and still, curtains drawn tight against the winter sun that now poured freely over the ridge. The driveway remained empty, no replacement car, no fresh tire tracks, slicing through the thinning snow. The dog no longer barked at passers-by. It was as if the woman who had once commanded every corner of Pinebrook Ridge had folded herself away, waiting for the storm to pass. But this time, the storm had been of her own making. At first, I braced for escalation. Another letter, a surprise lawsuit, perhaps a public campaign to salvage her reputation. Instead, the neighborhood discovered a new rhythm. Conversations on morning walks lingered longer. People nodded when they passed our house, some with shy smiles, others with quiet gratitude. No one mentioned Karen directly, but her absence spoke volumes. 3 days after the emergency meeting, an official letter arrived from the HOA. Not the familiar cream envelope, but plain white stationery bearing the community seal. Dear Mr. Delaney, following a thorough internal review of recent events, The board has determined that no violations were committed on your part. Furthermore, we recognize the necessity of updating our policies regarding temporary safety measures during environmental hazards. Your detailed records and persistent advocacy highlighted critical gaps in our current guidelines. Effective March 1st, the Pine Brook Ridge HOA will implement revised protocols permitting temporary hazard alerts that align with county safety standards without requiring prior board approval in urgent situations. Your commitment to community well-being has been invaluable. Thank you for your patience and resolve. Sincerely, the Pine Brook Ridge HOA Board. Lena read it aloud at the breakfast table, her voice soft with disbelief. When she finished, she passed it to me with a slow grin. You changed the rules, Jack. I just refused to let them stay broken. Owen traced the HOA seal with his finger. Does this mean no more mean letters? For now, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. For now. Almost overnight, new markers began to appear across the neighborhood. Not just on our street, but everywhere. Hand-painted wooden stakes with bold warnings. Watch for falling snow. Professionally printed signs on metal posts echoing my original design. Reflective caution tape fluttering from garages. One family even installed angled deflectors above their front entry, mirroring the ones I'd added to our roof months earlier. Marcus helped his next-door neighbors bolt snow guards to their eaves one Saturday afternoon, the two of them laughing over power tools, while their kids built forts in the yard. The Andersons, distant since our arrival, stopped me during a walk to ask about gutter angles and drainage slopes. Even the Fosters, who had once rolled their eyes at my orange posts, now displayed a discreet alert near their driveway. No one mocked the warnings anymore. They embraced them. Owen noticed, first pointing them out on our evening strolls. Look, Dad, that one's like yours. I smiled down at him. Not mine anymore. They're everyone's. One afternoon, I spotted Karen again. She wasn't at home. She sat alone in her beige sedan in the empty parking lot behind the community mailboxes, engine off, hands resting limply on the wheel. The windows were fogged slightly from her breath. She stared straight ahead, lost in whatever thoughts pride leaves behind when it finally cracks. I parked nearby to collect our mail and walked past her window. Slowly. She didn't glance up, but I paused anyway, speaking softly through the glass. I never wanted to humiliate you, Karen. I only wanted people to listen before someone got hurt. Truly. No response, not even a flicker. I walked on the cold air sharp in my lungs. That same week, the HOA portal announced a special election. A new board ballot appeared, no incumbents running for the top spots. Karen's name was absent entirely. Marcus's was at the top. He showed up at our door the evening before the vote, clipboard in hand, snowflakes melting on his shoulders. I figured it was time for some balance, he said simply. Less ruling, more listening. You in? I signed without hesitation. The election was quiet, almost anticlimactic. No speeches, no campaigns. Just residents marking ballots and slipping them into the box at the clubhouse. Marcus won in a landslide. His first act as the new president, he formalized the snow safety policy and gave it a name. The Delaney Provision, Section 4C. Homeowners may install temporary hazard alerts without prior board approval during periods of immediate environmental threat, provided the alerts are clearly visible, supported by reasonable evidence, and comply with county ordinances. It wasn't a plaque or a ceremony, just a line in the updated handbook. But Lena printed the page anyway and hung it above my desk in a simple frame. HOA history, she teased, kissing my cheek. I rolled my eyes. The last thing I ever wanted. No, she said softly. You wanted safety, and you got it. Later that week, as Owen and I worked on his school project about community leaders, he asked me to tell the story again, not the avalanche, but the parts before, the silence, the laughter at the signs, the way no one wanted to listen. Were you scared, Dad, when everyone was mad? Terrified, I admitted. But I was more afraid of staying quiet and something terrible happening. He nodded solemnly, gluing a photo of our caution marker onto his poster board. You stood up anyway. I had to. That night, fresh snow began to fall, light powdery flakes, drifting lazily from a peaceful sky. I stood at the window watching it dust the rooftops, the streetlights turning each flake into a tiny star. The neighborhood looked different now. Not perfect, not uniform, but awake, alive. And for the first time since we'd moved in, I didn't feel the need to stand guard. The weight had lifted. The lesson had settled. and Pinebrook Ridge finally felt like home. By early March, winter began its slow retreat from Pinebrook Ridge. The snow pulled back inch by inch, revealing patches of muddy grass, and the first brave crocuses pushing through the thaw. Icicles thinned two fragile spears, dripping steadily into puddles that reflected the strengthening sun. The air carried the clean mineral scent of melting ice and awakening earth, a promise that the long white siege was finally ending. In our home, the change felt deeper than the seasons. I noticed it in small things: Owen racing out the door without pausing to scan the roofline, his boots splashing through slush instead of crunching over packed ice. Lena's laughter came easier now, no longer edged with the quiet vigilance that had shadowed her for months. And in myself, I still glanced up out of habit when I stepped outside, but the old knot of dread had unraveled. The weight I'd carried since Caleb's death, sharpened by Karen's defiance, had finally loosened its grip. People waved as they passed our house, now real waves, warm and unhurried, the kind that acknowledged what had happened without needing to say it aloud. You were right. Thank you for not staying silent. The Delaney provision took effect officially that first week of March. Marcus sent a community-wide email signed by the new board with the updated handbook attached. At the bottom, a simple note: to Jack Delaney, for standing firm when it mattered most, for reminding us that safety isn't always tidy, but it's always worth it. I printed the email and tucked it into the binder that had once been a shield. Not for framing this time, just to keep. A quiet reminder that persistence, even when it feels lonely, can shift things. That Saturday, the sun broke through in full force, turning the neighborhood gold. I took Lena and Owen for a walk, no coats, no gloves, just the three of us breathing in the mild air. We passed houses that had once greeted us with cool distance. Now caution markers stood weathered, but proud, some faded from the sun, others freshly painted. Proof that lessons once learned the hard way tend to stick. Owen spotted a new one near the park pavilion, bright yellow letters warning about icicles, and tugged my sleeve. "Dad, another one like yours?" I smiled down at him. "Not mine anymore, buddy. Ours. The whole neighborhood's." As we passed Karen's house, I slowed without meaning to. The driveway was still bare curtains, drawn no sign of life. I didn't know if she'd moved or if she was simply waiting for spring to carry her away. Part of me hoped she'd found some peace in the quiet. The truth was, I no longer needed her apology or her understanding. The snow had already delivered its verdict, and the neighborhood had chosen to listen. Back home, I climbed the ladder to the roof one last time that season, just to check old instincts die hard. I ran my hand along the cleared shingles, tested the brackets on the snow guards, felt the warmth of the sun soaking into the dark surface. Everything held firm. As I turned to descend, I paused and looked out over the ridge. Below, Owen and Lena were in the yard, him launching a football with awkward, joyful throws, her catching it with exaggerated stumbles that sent them both into giggles. Their laughter floated up to me light and free. I stayed there longer than necessary, watching the two people I'd fought for through every ignored warning, every dismissive laugh, every sleepless night. In that moment, I understood it fully. This hadn't been about HOA rules or aesthetic codes. It hadn't even been about Karen. It was about stewardship of my home, my family, the fragile trust that holds a community together. About refusing to let pride or silence cost someone else what it had once cost me. The wind shifted gentle and warm against my face, carrying away the last chill of winter. With it went the tension I'd held for months, the clenched fear, the constant vigilance. It simply released. That night, we invited neighbors over for the first time since the storm. Marcus arrived with a pot of his famous chili. The Andersons brought cornbread, still steaming from the oven. Others trickled in with desserts and Stories boots lined up by the door coats slung over chairs. The fireplace crackled, filling the room with wood smoke. An easy conversation, no politics, no tension, just the comfortable hum of people glad to be together. Owen dragged out the old binder at one point, holding it up like a trophy. "My dad helped make the neighborhood safer," he announced proudly. Marcus raised his glass of cider. "To Jack for speaking up when the rest of us were too busy looking the other way." Everyone drank. I felt my cheeks warm, but for once it wasn't embarrassment. It was gratitude. Later, when the house was quiet again, and the embers glowed low, Lena leaned into me on the couch. "This place finally feels like home," she whispered. "Even with the HOA," I teased. She smiled against my shoulder, especially because of how you stood up to it. We sat in the stillness, letting the peace settle deep. Outside, the last traces of snow gleamed under the streetlights, soon to vanish entirely. But the lesson lingered stronger than any rulebook, deeper than any regret. Warn when you must. Stand when it matters. Never apologize for protecting what you love. Because sometimes the heaviest thing isn't the snow that falls. It's the silence of those who see danger coming and choose not to speak. My voice had broken that silence. And in doing so, it hadn't just saved a roof. It had helped save a community. And in some quiet way, it had begun to heal the boy inside me, who'd never stopped hearing his brother's name in the hush after the fall.